probably be 2 more appointments to the court. There's probably 2 people going to retire. Just imagine if he has 2 more appointments on that, what that means forever.
It's the stuff of my nightmares. President Joe Biden addressing the massive stakes in a brand new interview. This week, we're learning about a seismic shift in response from him to the Supreme Court's years now of transgressions and bucking of important precedents vital to the functioning of a democracy. President Joe Biden's plans to endorse major court reform, including term limits, an enforceable ethics code for justices, and, as the Washington Post reports, possibly the elimination of broad immunity for American presidents. It comes after President Biden long resisted calls from his own party, many of whom have had their own legislative proposals in this area at the ready. Some have called for the impeachment of Justice Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito for, quote, unchecked corruption, or demanded a special counsel investigation into whether Justice Thomas's repeated failures to disclose lavish gifts violated federal law, including our next guest, Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. David Jolly's here as well. Senator, this story broke while we were on the air, and I wish that I'd sort of seen you reading the news. I waited for your reaction. Your thoughts to news that President Joe Biden's moving in this direction.
Very good news.
Yeah.
The court ethics bill is through the Senate Judiciary Committee, and to have the president's support for that is very important. And we have both term limit bills in the House and in the Senate. I'm the author of the lead Senate bill, and that's really important to restructure the court. It has become so politicized and it has become so grandiose that things that I think were unthinkable just a few years ago are now, I think, viewed as extremely necessary by most Americans. And first off, we need to get to the bottom of what's gone wrong. I mean, we got to finish the investigating.
Senator, one of the things that's different is how much the wind of American public support is behind all of these initiatives. Let me read you some polling from Fox News, of all places. 60% of respondents in a Fox News poll disapprove of the Supreme Court. Only 38% approve. 56% disapprove of the immunity decision. 78% of all respondents approve of 18-year term limits for justices. This sort of feels like, a synergy of public opinion, a Supreme Court that is all but begging for this, people like yourself who've led these efforts, and a president who's ready to make a big and important move.
Yeah, and I think even bigger than those numbers are the numbers of people who want to understand what has happened at the Supreme Court, who think that Congress should do a full and proper investigation. And so, although Republicans are obstructing the Senate investigation right now, if voters put the House in Democratic hands, guess what Republican senators can't do? They can't filibuster a House subpoena. And Mr. Barron and Mr. Navarro learned a little bit about House subpoenas recently. So a whole investigative avenue could open up after the election. And we also hope that the Attorney General will do his job and look into these very predicated allegations that we've referred to him.
Is the next step on the investigations for him to either open, to find probable cause and open an investigation, or appoint a special counsel? Is that what would happen next?
Yeah, there are 2 ways into this. One is that the Attorney General could appoint a special counsel and instruct the special counsel to look into the tax problems, potential tax fraud, the potential felony false statements, and the criminal misfilings under the disclosure laws, that whole package of issues. At the same time, the Judicial Conference is looking at making a referral to the Attorney General on whether Justice Thomas's misfilings under the Disclosure Act were willful. If there's a reasonable chance that they were willful, then that question of whether they were willful has to be referred by them to the Attorney General. So the Attorney General has 2 avenues at least into this.
It's extraordinary. Let me bring into our conversation Sherrilyn Ifill. She's the Endowed Chair in Civil Rights at Howard University. It's a pleasure to get to talk to you. Thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Let me first ask you about the news that broke yesterday, about 24 hours ago, in the Washington Post, that President Joe Biden is preparing to announce support for Supreme Court reform. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that certainly President Biden has been on a journey, but I think many people, particularly many attorneys and those who practice in the Supreme Court, have been on a journey in becoming comfortable with the idea that some reform is absolutely necessary. And I think that many people will attribute Biden's transformation to political calculation, but I'm not sure that's true. I can tell you that there are a number of us in the field who practice, who are lawyers, who have tremendous respect for the institution of the Supreme Court, who have been shocked and appalled and deeply concerned about what we have seen the majority of this Supreme Court do, not only in terms of their ethical conduct, but in terms of the kinds of decision making and some of the kind of recklessness that we're seeing in the opinions that they're writing.
Yeah, I mean, Sherilyn, I interviewed President Biden a year ago, and I saw exactly what you're describing, some of this institutional deference and reference. But I would argue that in addition to public opinion, we were talking about the polls. I mean, you've got 80% of Americans who would like to see term limits for Supreme Court justices. That the political climate is certainly favorable to reform and pretty scornful, frankly, of leaving the status quo in place, which includes a lot of Republicans, if you believe the way people are registered and self-identify. What's changed seems to me to be the Supreme Court and the cries coming from inside the House. I mean, you can read the alarm in the dissents of Justices Sotomayor and Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, Justice Kagan. I mean, the radical nature of the opinions this term seems to be at least one of the variables.
Yeah, that's why I've often said, Nicole, that it's not just what the courts are deciding, but it's how they're deciding it, shortcuts that they're taking. It's the overreach, the lack of judicial restraint. All of that is part and parcel of what has concerned people. This is a court on a mission, and the mission seems to be to gather for itself as much power as it possibly can. And so we've seen this court undercutting the power of the executive branch through administrative agencies. We've seen this court cutting the power of Congress, creating their own standards for statutes that fall within Congress's purview. We've seen them unleashing the power of the president in this immunity decision. We have seen them returning us to a kind of states' rights republic, which I thought we had addressed with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution. But they're doing this in the abortion realm. They're gathering this power to say not only what the law is, but how American life will be lived. And if a court is doing its job, you shouldn't be noticing it that much.
Yeah.
You notice your legislature, you notice your president. You shouldn't be noticing the courts that much in how you live your everyday life. But now 10-year-old girls have to notice the court if they have been victims of rape and are pregnant and have to now travel to another state to get an abortion. So something's gone off the rails, and there's a sense in which the court seems to believe it is untouchable. And yet Congress does have a great deal of power to manage and regulate much of the power of the court.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.